As you can see, the projected growth for Q3 is exponential.
Oh my God, look at the screen. Is that a fraud investigation?
The garage door had been broken for 3 months, and every time I looked at it, Madison's voice echoed in my head. Chris, when are you going to fix that eyesore? Tonight, crouched behind my workbench at 11:30 p.m., I finally understood why she'd stopped asking. I can't believe I settled for a teacher. Her voice drifted through the thin wall separating our garage from the kitchen. She was on the phone, probably with her sister Jenna, using that tone she reserved for discussing life's disappointments. Grant's offering us a real future. Chris can't even fix a garage door. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I froze, socket wrench in hand. Grant? Jenna's venture capitalist boyfriend? What did he have to do with our future? You should see how pathetic he looks grading papers every night, Madison continued, her laughter sharp as broken glass. 38 years old and still playing with red pens like some kind of overgrown hall monitor. Nothing like being the punchline in your own marriage. If only sarcasm paid the bills, I'd be richer than Grant's fake portfolio. I set down my tools and crept closer to the door. Madison's voice was clearer now, animated in a way I hadn't heard in months. The dinner party's tomorrow night at Grant's penthouse. Just promise me you'll keep Chris from embarrassing us again. You know how he gets around successful people. Successful people. Right, because teaching Shakespeare to hormone-addled teenagers was clearly society's bottom rung, while selling overpriced handbags to bored housewives was the pinnacle of achievement. I know, but what if he finds out about... Madison's voice dropped to a whisper. I pressed my ear against the door, heart hammering against my ribs. The hotel receipts are in my purse. I'll handle it. Chris is too wrapped up in his little world to notice anything real. Hotel receipts. My mouth went dry. After Madison hung up, I stood in that garage for 20 minutes, staring at the broken door mechanism. Funny how some things break slowly, piece by piece, until one day you realize the whole system's been shot to hell for longer than you thought. The next morning, Madison bustled around our kitchen like nothing had happened, brewing coffee and scrolling through her phone with the practiced efficiency of someone managing multiple lives. Don't forget about dinner tonight, she said without looking up. 7 sharp. And please, Chris, try to make conversation. Grant's bringing some potential investors. Investors for what? His new app venture. He's revolutionizing social commerce. She finally glanced at me, and I caught something flickering behind her eyes. Guilt? Impatience? You could learn something from him. I sipped my coffee, studying her face. Madison was beautiful in that carefully maintained way that required constant effort. Gym memberships, salon appointments, boutique clothes that cost more than my monthly salary. When had I stopped being worth that effort? What kind of app? Does it matter? The point is he's building something, creating value. She grabbed her purse from the counter. Some people adapt to the modern world, Chris. Others just complain about it. After she left, I stood in our empty kitchen, surrounded by the detritus of a life I barely recognized. Granite countertops we couldn't afford, a coffee machine that cost more than most of my students' families spent on groceries, art prints that Madison had chosen because they elevated the space. When had I become a supporting character in my own story? At school that day, I taught Hamlet to my AP English class, and the irony wasn't lost on me. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark, I read aloud, while 17-year-old faces stared back at me with varying degrees of interest. Mr. Patterson, Sarah Mitchell raised her hand. Why doesn't Hamlet just confront Claudius directly? Why all the games? Good question, Sarah. What do you think? Maybe he needs proof, like real evidence before he acts. Smart kid. Exactly. Hamlet knows something's wrong, but knowing and proving are different things. He has to be strategic. After class, I sat at my desk grading essays about betrayal and revenge, wondering if Shakespeare had ever felt like a fraud teaching life lessons he couldn't follow himself. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Running late. Meet us at Grant's, address attached. And Chris, please don't be yourself tonight. Don't be yourself. There's a relationship destroyer if I ever heard one." Grant's penthouse occupied the top floor of the newest building downtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of aggressive modernity that screamed, "I have money and you don't." The elevator ride to the 20th floor gave me plenty of time to rehearse normal conversation topics that wouldn't embarrass my wife. Madison answered the door wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Black, expensive, the kind that made her look like she belonged in this world of marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows. "You made it," she said, kissing my cheek with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a distant relative. The apartment was full of people I didn't recognize, all holding wine glasses and discussing market trends with the casual authority of those who'd never worried about mortgage payments. Madison disappeared immediately, gliding between groups like she'd been born to this life. I found the kitchen and poured myself a beer from a refrigerator that probably cost more than my car. "Chris, there you are!" Jenna appeared beside me, blonde and sharp-edged in the way that suggested expensive maintenance. She'd always looked at me like I was a stain on her sister's potential. "Great party," I said. "Isn't it? Grant really knows how to bring people together. You should mingle. There are some fascinating people here tonight." "I'm sure." She studied my face with the calculating look I'd learned to recognize. "You know, Chris, Madison's been so stressed lately with the boutique expansion. She could really use your support." "What kind of support?" "Emotional, financial, the kind that comes from understanding your wife's dreams." Jenna sipped her wine. "Grant's been such a help with the business plan. It's wonderful when successful people take an interest." Before I could respond, a booming voice cut through the party noise. "Everyone, gather around! Time for the big announcement!" Grant stood in the center of the living room, arms spread wide like a conquering hero. He was tall, handsome in that generic way that came from good genes and better personal trainers, with the kind of smile that sold luxury cars and political campaigns. The crowd formed a semicircle around him, Madison positioning herself prominently in the front row. "As you all know," Grant began, "I've been working on something revolutionary, something that's going to change how we think about social commerce." He clicked a remote, and a presentation appeared on the wall-mounted TV. Charts, graphs, buzzwords floating over stock photos of happy people holding phones. Social Shop is more than an app. It's a lifestyle platform. We're talking about a complete ecosystem where influence meets commerce, where every social interaction becomes an opportunity for value creation. The crowd murmured appreciatively. I noticed Madison hanging on every word, her face glowing with the kind of admiration I hadn't seen in years. "But enough about me," Grant continued, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on me. "Let's hear from everyone else. Chris, come on up here, buddy. Tell us what you do." Every face turned toward me. Madison's expression was pure panic. "I teach high school English," I said. "High school!" Grant's smile widened. "That's so important. Really, truly vital work. How does it feel to be shaping young minds?" There was something in his tone, a subtle mockery wrapped in false enthusiasm. The crowd was watching like this was dinner theater, waiting for the entertainment to begin. "It's rewarding," I said. "I bet it is. And the pay must be adequate?" Madison's face had gone pale. "We get by." "Of course you do. Teachers are so noble that way, making sacrifices for the greater good." Grant gestured broadly. "I mean, here we are talking about creating generational wealth, building empires, changing the world, and you're content with your little classroom and your little lessons. It's almost refreshing, isn't it, everyone? Such simple ambitions." The room was silent now, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. "Chris doesn't like to brag," Madison said quickly, but he's very dedicated to his students. Oh, I'm sure he is. How many students do you have, Chris? 30? 40? Imagine if you had that kind of impact on the business world instead of just, what do you call it, babysitting? That's when something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone and opened LinkedIn, fingers moving with the calm precision of someone who'd finally found his target. Actually, Grant, speaking of business impact, I was curious about your background, your track record with previous ventures. Grant's smile flickered. Well, because according to your LinkedIn profile, you were recently let go from Synergy Solutions for performance issues. And before that, you were unemployed for 8 months. And your MBA? Turns out that program was never accredited. I held up my phone, showing the screen to the room. Funny thing about the internet, it remembers everything. The silence was deafening. Grant's face had gone from confident tan to sickly pale. How did you... That's not... Oh, and this is interesting. Your revolutionary app, the code samples you showed last month, they're copied directly from an open-source project that's been around for 3 years. Madison was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You see, I continued, warming to my theme, us teachers, we're pretty good at research. Comes with the territory. We also know how to spot plagiarism from a mile away. Grant lunged toward me, but I'd already connected my phone to his smart TV using the guest network password helpfully displayed on his kitchen counter. His real LinkedIn profile filled the screen. Unemployed, unqualified, currently under investigation for securities fraud in 2 states. Chris, Madison hissed. What are you doing? Educating, I said. Isn't that what I do? Grant was sputtering, trying to grab the remote, but the damage was done. The investors were already heading for the door, pulling out their phones to call lawyers and accountants. I walked calmly to the elevator, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and one very angry, fake venture capitalist. As the doors closed, I heard Madison's voice rising above the chaos. I am so sorry, everyone. He's not usually like this. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I was never like anything. I was just Chris the teacher, Chris the husband, Chris the supporting character in everyone else's story. Not anymore. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the skull. Madison hadn't come home until after 2 a.m., and when she did, she'd slept in the guest room. I lay in our king-sized bed. Her choice, not mine, staring at the ceiling and listening to her move around downstairs with the aggressive efficiency of someone planning a war. By the time I made it to the kitchen, she was already dressed for battle in her power suit, the one she wore when firing employees or negotiating with difficult suppliers. We need to talk, she said without looking up from her phone. Good morning to you too. Don't. Her voice could have cut glass. Don't you dare act like this is normal morning banter, Chris. Do you have any idea what you did last night? I poured coffee into my favorite mug, a chipped ceramic thing one of my students had made in art class. It said, "World's okayest teacher," in uneven letters. I told the truth. You humiliated me. You humiliated us both. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and fury. Grant is talking about suing you for defamation. With what money? His unemployment checks? This isn't a joke, Chris. These people, they're my clients, my friends, my business network. And you just destroyed everything because you couldn't handle being around successful people. I sat down across from her at our expensive kitchen table, noting how she flinched away when I got too close. Successful people? Madison, the guy's a fraud. I saved those investors from losing their money. You don't know that. I researched him. Everything I said was true. It doesn't matter if it's true. She slammed her hand on the table, making our fancy salt shakers jump. It matters that you made me look like an idiot in front of everyone who matters in this town. Everyone who matters. Not everyone we care about. Everyone who matters. When did you start caring so much about what Grant thinks? Something flickered across her face, Too quick to catch, but I saw it. Fear. Guilt. The look of someone with secrets. I don't. But Jenna does, and she's my sister, and you just ruined her relationship because you couldn't stand not being the smartest person in the room for 5 minutes. Is that what you think happened? I think you've been looking for an excuse to sabotage my success ever since the boutique started doing well. You can't handle that. I'm building something real while you're stuck grading papers and complaining about teenagers. The coffee tasted bitter in my mouth. Your boutique that I helped finance with my teacher's pension loan? That you lord over me every chance you get. Yes, Chris, you helped. You've helped with everything, and I'm grateful, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy my relationships when you feel insecure. She grabbed her purse and keys, moving toward the door with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been planning this exit. Where are you going? To do damage control, to apologize to people, to try to salvage what's left of my reputation in this town. She paused at the door. And Chris, don't wait up. I'll be staying at Jenna's tonight. We both need space to think. After she left, I sat in that kitchen for an hour, surrounded by the evidence of a life we'd built together. Wedding photos on the refrigerator, her coffee cup in the sink, still bearing traces of her lipstick, the grocery list in her handwriting, full of organic this and artisanal that. When had we stopped being a team? At school, the whispers followed me down the hallway like shadows. Small towns have their own communication networks, faster and more efficient than any social media platform. By lunch, half the faculty knew about my incident at Grant's party. Principal Delaney called me into his office during my planning period. Chris, sit down. We need to discuss last night. Tom Delaney had been running Jefferson High for 15 years, and he'd seen every kind of teacher crisis imaginable. He was fair but practical, the kind of administrator who valued stability above all else. How did you... Janet Morrison was at that party. Her husband's one of Grant's potential investors. He leaned back in his chair. She called me this morning, very concerned about your behavior. Janet Morrison, parent of 2 former students, school board member and grade A gossip. Of course. Tom, I can explain. I'm sure you can. The question is whether I want to hear it. He studied my face with the weary expression of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. Chris, you're a good teacher. Your students respect you, your colleagues like you, and your test scores are solid. But this is a small town, and perception matters. So does truth. Does it? Because from where I sit, it looks like you publicly humiliated a prominent businessman and embarrassed your wife in front of half the town's social elite. That's not truth, Chris. That's poor judgment. I wanted to argue, to explain about the research and the fraud and the fake credentials. But looking at Tom's face, I realized it didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, I wasn't the whistleblower. I was the jealous husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. Are you firing me? No. But I am strongly suggesting you find a way to make this right. Apologize to Grant, smooth things over with your wife, and let this blow over quietly. He leaned forward. Can you do that? I'll think about it. Don't think too long. The school board meets next month, and Janet Morrison has a lot of influence. That afternoon, I tried to focus on teaching Macbeth to my juniors, but the parallels were too obvious to ignore. Ambition, betrayal, the corruption of power, Shakespeare had covered all the bases. Mr. Patterson? Tommy Chen raised his hand. Why does Lady Macbeth go crazy? I mean, she was so strong at the beginning. What do you think, Tommy? Maybe she couldn't handle the guilt. Like, she thought she wanted power, but when she got it, she realized what it actually cost. Smart kid. They always were, when you gave them a chance to think. After school, I drove to Frank's boxing gym instead of going home. Frank Delacroix had been my college roommate, and his gym was the closest thing I had to a sanctuary in this town. The place smelled like sweat and leather and honest work, a welcome change from the antiseptic perfection of Grant's penthouse. Well, well, Frank looked up from wrapping someone's hands. If it isn't the town's newest celebrity. You heard? Brother, everyone's heard. Janet Morrison's been calling it the incident, like it's some kind of historical event. He grinned. I'm proud of you. Madison's not. Madison's embarrassed. There's a difference. Frank finished with his client and walked over to where I was sitting on a bench. You want to tell me what really happened? So I did. All of it. The overheard phone call, the hotel receipts, the research, the confrontation. Frank listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. Hotel receipts? He said finally. Yeah. You think she's cheating? I think a lot of things. I don't know anything. Frank was quiet for a long moment, watching his fighters work the heavy bags with methodical precision. You know what your problem is, Chris? You fight like a teacher. What's that supposed to mean? You use facts and logic and expect people to see reason. But this ain't a classroom, and these people ain't your students. They don't care about truth. They care about power, money, and looking good to their friends. So what am I supposed to do? Stop fighting fair. They want to play dirty, play dirtier. They want to humiliate you, humiliate them back. He stood up and grabbed a pair of gloves from the rack. But first, you need to get in shape. Can't win a war if you're soft. I spent the next hour hitting bags and working on footwork, letting the physical exertion burn away some of the anger and frustration. Frank was right about one thing. I'd been fighting like a teacher, expecting fairness and reason in a world that valued neither. When I got home that evening, the house felt different, emptier. Madison's absence was like a missing tooth. You couldn't stop probing the space where something used to be. I made myself dinner and tried to grade papers, but my mind kept wandering to that overheard phone call. Hotel receipts. What if he finds out about what? I found myself standing in front of Madison's home office, staring at the door like it might hold answers. She'd always been protective of her business paperwork, claiming it was too boring for me to understand. But I wasn't looking for business paperwork. The door was locked, but I knew where she kept the spare key, inside a fake book on the hallway shelf. Pride and Prejudice, which would have been funny if it weren't so appropriate. Madison's office was organized with military precision, color-coded files, labeled folders, everything in its proper place. I felt like an intruder in my own home, but I couldn't stop myself. Her purse was on the desk, the same one she'd grabbed that morning when rushing out to do damage control. Inside, tucked between credit cards and business cards, I found what I was looking for. Hotel receipts. 3 of them, from the Marriott downtown. All from the past month. All for rooms I'd never seen. But it wasn't Grant's name on the credit card authorization. It was Frank's. I sat in Madison's office chair, staring at those hotel receipts like they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Frank Delacroix, my college roommate, my boxing coach, my best friend for 20 years. The dates told a story I didn't want to read. March 15th, March 22nd, April 3rd. All weekdays. All times when I was at school and Madison was supposedly managing the boutique. My phone buzzed. A text from Madison. Staying another night at Jenna's. Need more time to think. Another lie. Because if she was really at Jenna's, why were there fresh hotel receipts in her purse? I photographed everything, then carefully put the receipts back where I'd found them. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystallizing into something cold and sharp. Frank. The guy who'd been pushing me to fight dirty. The guy who'd listened to my marriage problems with such sympathetic attention. The guy who'd been so proud of me for standing up to Grant. Of course he'd been proud. I'd been doing his dirty work, eliminating the competition. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every interaction, every piece of advice Frank had given me over the past few months. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? The next morning, I called in sick to school and drove to the boutique district, where Madison's store occupied a prime corner location. Elevated Essentials proclaimed the sign in elegant script, above windows displaying the kind of clothes that cost more than most people's rent. I parked across the street and waited. At 10:30, Madison arrived in her BMW, looking professional and put together despite supposedly having an emotional crisis. She unlocked the store, turned on the lights, and began her morning routine. At 11:15, Frank's pickup truck pulled into the alley behind the building. I watched him walk around to the front entrance like he belonged there, like this was routine. Madison let him in and flipped the sign to "Closed for private appointment." They disappeared into the back room. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching the closed sign and feeling something die inside my chest. Not love. That had been dying slowly for months. This was something else. Trust. The belief that I knew the people in my life. When Frank finally emerged, he looked satisfied in a way that had nothing to do with business. He drove away without noticing me, probably heading back to his gym to dispense more wisdom about fighting dirty. Madison reopened the store 20 minutes later, after taking time to fix her hair and reapply her lipstick. I drove home and called Tom Delaney. "I need another day," I told him. "Chris, you can't keep... Family emergency. I'll be back tomorrow." I spent the rest of the day researching. Not Grant this time, Frank and Madison. If they thought I was just a naive teacher who couldn't handle the real world, they were about to learn otherwise. Madison's business records were public information. Frank's gym had been struggling financially for 2 years. But somehow, 3 months ago, he'd managed to make a large payment on his back rent and upgrade his equipment. 3 months ago. Right around the time Madison had started talking about expanding the boutique and needing more business flexibility. I cross-referenced the dates with our joint banking statements. Madison had been moving money, small amounts, nothing that would trigger suspicion, but consistent transfers to a business account I didn't recognize. Elevated Fitness Consulting, LLC, Frank's new company, funded with my money, through my wife, for services I was pretty sure had nothing to do with fitness. By evening, I had enough evidence to destroy both of them. Bank records, hotel receipts, business filings, even security camera footage from the hotel lobby that I'd sweet-talked out of a sympathetic desk clerk who remembered me from my substitute teaching days. Madison came home at 8, carrying takeout from that expensive Thai place downtown. "I brought dinner," she announced, as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk." We sat at our kitchen table like a normal married couple, picking at pad thai and pretending this was a reconciliation dinner instead of a negotiation. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began carefully. "About Grant, about the party. Maybe you had a point." "Did I?" He was being condescending. I can see how that would be frustrating. She reached across the table and touched my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't defend you." Her fingers were soft, manicured, adorned with the wedding ring I'd saved for 6 months to buy. When had her touch started feeling like a performance? "It's okay." "No, it's not. We're supposed to be a team, Chris. I lost sight of that." She squeezed my hand. "I want to make this right." "How?" "I'm cutting ties with Grant. Jenna's upset, but she'll get over it, and I'm refocusing on what matters, us, our marriage, our future together." She was good. If I hadn't seen those hotel receipts, hadn't watched Frank walk into her store, I might have believed her. "What about the boutique expansion?" "I'm scaling back, being more conservative with the finances." She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. "Maybe you were right about taking things slower." "And your business consultant?" Her smile flickered. "What business consultant?" "Elevated Fitness Consulting, Frank's new company. The one you've been paying for 3 months." The color drained from her face. "Chris, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'm really curious about what kind of fitness consulting requires hotel rooms." She let go of my hand and sat back in her chair, her expression shifting from guilty to calculating. How long have you known? Does it matter? It matters to me. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos, the receipts, the bank statements, the security footage of her and Frank entering the Marriott together. Long enough. Madison stared at the evidence for a long moment, then looked up at me with something like respect. You're not as naive as I thought. Apparently not. So what happens now? You divorce me? Take half of everything? Ruin my business? I haven't decided. She leaned forward, switching tactics. Chris, what Frank and I have, it's not about you. It's not about our marriage. It's just physical. Stress relief. It doesn't mean anything. Stress relief that I paid for? The money was always going to come back to us. Frank's gym is an investment. When it becomes profitable, Madison, the guy's been running that place into the ground for 5 years. He's not a businessman. He's just a guy with a good line and flexible morals. Her mask was slipping now, revealing something harder underneath. At least he's not content with mediocrity. At least he wants more than a steady paycheck and a quiet life. Like Grant? Grant was a mistake. Frank is what? Your future? Your way out of this marriage? She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Maybe he is. There it was, the truth, finally. Not an affair born of passion or loneliness, but a calculated exit strategy. Frank wasn't just her lover, he was her escape plan. How long have you been planning this? Since Christmas. Maybe longer. She shrugged. I've been unhappy for a while, Chris. We both have. Frank just helped me realize I didn't have to stay that way. So why not just ask for a divorce? Why the elaborate deception? Because I needed time to set things up. The business, the finances, the transition. Frank understood that. He was patient. Patient. Like this was a business merger instead of the destruction of a marriage. And Grant? Grant was supposed to be cover. A respectable relationship that would make the divorce look natural. But then you had to play detective and ruin everything. I almost admired the complexity of it. Madison and Frank had orchestrated an entire campaign, using my money to fund their future while positioning me as the obstacle to overcome. You could have just been honest. Could I? Would you have agreed to finance my new life with another man? Would you have quietly stepped aside while I took half of everything we'd built together? She had a point. I probably would have fought it, made it messy, forced her to start over with nothing. So what now? I asked. Now we do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice. Her voice was steady, businesslike. I file for divorce, we split assets, and you get to keep your dignity. Or I tell everyone that you've been abusive, controlling, and unstable. Janet Morrison's already concerned about your behavior. How hard would it be to convince people that last night was part of a pattern? The threat hung between us like smoke. You'd do that? I'd do whatever it takes to protect my future. Frank's future. We've worked too hard to let you destroy everything out of spite. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and realized I was seeing her clearly for the first time in years. She wasn't the woman I'd married, or maybe she was, and I'd just been too blind to see it. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. But Chris? She stood up and collected her purse. Don't take too long, and don't do anything stupid. You've already embarrassed yourself enough for 1 week. After she left, back to Jenna's or to Frank's or to another hotel room I'd end up paying for, I sat in our kitchen and made a list. Everything I'd lost, my marriage, my best friend, my money, my reputation, my peace of mind, everything they'd gained, each other, my financial support, the moral high ground, and a plan for the future. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed I was the same person who'd been grading papers and fixing garage doors and accepting scraps of affection for the past few years. They were wrong. I wasn't that person anymore. The next morning, I returned to school with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. My students noticed the difference immediately. "Mr. Patterson seems different today," I heard Sarah Mitchell whisper to her friend. "Like, more focused or something." She was right. I was focused. For the first time in years, I had a clear objective and the motivation to achieve it. During lunch, I sat in my classroom and made phone calls. First, to a divorce attorney named Rebecca Torres, who'd been recommended by another teacher who'd gone through a messy separation. Rebecca was sharp, experienced, and had a reputation for protecting her clients' assets. "I need to see you today," I told her. "Mr. Patterson, I'm booked solid this week. It's urgent. My wife is planning to file first, and I have reason to believe she's been hiding assets. Can you be here at 4:30? I'll be there." Second, to my bank. I moved our joint savings into a separate account, leaving just enough in the original to avoid triggering alerts. If Madison wanted to play financial games, she'd discover I could learn the rules quickly. Third, to a private investigator Frank had mentioned once, a guy who specialized in insurance fraud and cheating spouses. I'd thought it was a joke at the time. Now I realized Frank had probably been planning ahead. Jim Hawkins' investigations. "Mr. Hawkins, I need documentation of an extramarital affair. Professional quality, court-admissible evidence." "How soon do you need it?" "Yesterday." "I can start today. My rate is $200 a day plus expenses." "Done." By the time school ended, I had a team assembled and a strategy forming. Madison and Frank thought they were playing chess while I was stuck playing checkers. Time to show them I'd been studying the board. Rebecca Torres had an office in the professional district, all glass and steel and the kind of aggressive competence that cost $300 an hour. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp suit that suggested she won more cases than she lost. "Tell me everything," she said after I'd signed her retainer agreement. So I did. The affair, the financial manipulation, the business scheme, the threats. She took notes in precise handwriting, occasionally asking questions that revealed just how thoroughly Madison had outmaneuvered me. "She's good," Rebecca said finally. "Professional-level manipulation. The business consultant angle is particularly clever. It gives her legal cover for the money transfers. Can we prove fraud? Maybe, but it'll be expensive and time-consuming. There's a faster way. Which is? We file first today and freeze all joint assets pending investigation. She's been moving money without your knowledge, which gives us grounds for an emergency hearing." "What about her threats? The abuse allegations?" Rebecca smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Let her try. I've seen her type before. They're dangerous when they're in control, but they panic when someone fights back. If she files false allegations, we'll destroy her credibility and probably get sanctions." "How long will this take?" "Depends how hard they want to fight. But Mr. Patterson, based on what you've told me, you're going to come out ahead. She's been too clever for her own good." That evening, I drove to Frank's gym. Not to confront him, not yet, but to observe. Jim Hawkins had already started surveillance, but I wanted to see the place through new eyes. The gym looked different now that I knew it was funded with my money. The new equipment, the fresh paint, the expanded weight room, all of it purchased with funds Madison had diverted from our joint accounts. Frank was training a client, demonstrating proper form with the patient competence that had made him a good friend and, apparently, an effective seducer. He looked up when I walked in, and his smile seemed genuine. "Chris, good to see you, brother. How are you holding up?" "Better. I took your advice." "Yeah? What advice was that?" "About fighting dirty." Something flickered in his eyes, but his smile never wavered. "Good man. Sometimes you got to get your hands dirty to win." "Madison and I are working things out," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Marriage counseling, the whole thing. She's cutting ties with people who were bad influences." "That's great, Chris. Really great. She's a good woman. You're lucky to have her." "I know. We both realized we were letting outside people interfere with our relationship. She's being more careful about who she trusts. Frank's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Smart policy. Yeah, she's even thinking about changing business consultants. Says she wants someone with better credentials. Business consultants? For the boutique expansion. She's been working with some fitness guy, but she thinks he might be taking advantage of her. I shrugged. You know how trusting she is. Frank's knuckles were white where he gripped the training equipment. Anyway, I continued, I should let you get back to work. Thanks for all the advice, Frank. You've been a real friend. I left him standing there, probably trying to figure out how much I knew and whether he should warn Madison. Let him sweat. That night, Madison came home carrying an overnight bag and wearing the expression of someone prepared for battle. We need to finish our conversation, she announced. Do we? Chris, I've been thinking about what I said yesterday. I was angry and frustrated, but I don't want this to get ugly. Neither do I. She seemed surprised by my reasonable tone. Good. So we can handle this like adults. I'll file for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. We'll split everything 50-50, and we'll both move on with our lives. That sounds fair. It is fair. More than fair, considering... She trailed off. Considering what? Considering I could make things very difficult for you if I wanted to. I nodded thoughtfully. You could try. I could succeed, Chris. Don't underestimate me. I wouldn't dream of it. You've been planning this for months. You're obviously very capable. Again, she seemed thrown by my calm response. She'd been expecting anger, threats, emotional outbursts. Instead, I was agreeing with her. So, we're settled? You'll agree to the divorce terms? I'll consider them. But Madison? I filed this afternoon. The color drained from her face. You what? Filed for divorce, fraud, adultery, dissipation of marital assets, the whole package. I pulled out my phone and showed her the electronic filing confirmation. My attorney says we have a strong case. You can't prove fraud. Can't I? Elevated Fitness Consulting, LLC, registered 3 months ago by Frank Delacroix, funded entirely through transfers from our joint account, providing services that seemed to require hotel rooms and afternoon appointments. She sank into a chair, her confident mask finally slipping. The money was always going to come back. Was it? Because according to the business filings, you're listed as co-owner of Frank's company. That doesn't sound like a loan, Madison. That sounds like you were stealing marital assets to fund your new life. It's not stealing if it's my money too. It's stealing if you're hiding it from your spouse and using it to finance an affair. She was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating her options. What do you want? I want what's mine. The house, my pension contributions, my share of your business, and compensation for the money you stole. And if I fight you? Then we'll both spend a fortune on lawyers, and everything will come out in court, including the hotel receipts, the surveillance footage, and whatever else my investigator finds. You hired a private investigator? I learned from the best. You taught me that sometimes you have to be strategic. Madison stood up and walked to the window, staring out at our neighborhood with the expression of someone watching a dream die. I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? I thought you'd just accept it. File for divorce quietly, take your half, and let me start over. Without the affair? Without the financial manipulation? Those were complications. Frank was supposed to be temporary just until I could get established. But then I realized I was happier with him than I'd been with you in years. So you decided to steal my money to fund your happiness. I decided to take control of my life instead of waiting for permission. She turned back to face me, and for a moment, I saw something like the woman I'd married, determined, intelligent, uncompromising. You're going to destroy me, aren't you? I'm going to protect myself. There's a difference. Is there? because from where I sit, it looks like revenge. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was revenge, dressed up in legal terminology and moral justification. But if so, it was the kind of revenge that came with receipts and documentation and a reasonable chance of success. Call it whatever you want, Madison. But understand this. I'm not the same person who was grading papers while you planned your exit strategy. You wanted me to fight dirty? Congratulations. You got your wish. She left that night, and I knew she wouldn't be coming back. The house felt different without her, not empty, but clean. Like a weight had been lifted. My phone buzzed, a text from Frank. We need to talk. I smiled and deleted the message without responding. Let him sweat a little longer. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, which gave me a week to gather additional evidence and watch my carefully constructed plan unfold. Rebecca Torres had been right about one thing. Madison and Frank were panicking. Jim Hawkins called me Wednesday morning with an update that exceeded my expectations. Your wife and her boyfriend are making mistakes, he reported. Yesterday, they met at a coffee shop downtown and had what looked like a heated argument. Today, she withdrew $5,000 in cash from the business account. Flight risk? Or evidence destruction? Either way, it doesn't look good for them. I've got photos, audio recordings, and a paper trail that would make the IRS proud. What about Frank's gym? That's where it gets interesting. Turns out your money wasn't the only funding source. He's been running a side business, selling steroids to high school athletes. Small operation, but definitely illegal. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Frank hadn't just betrayed our friendship, he'd been endangering kids. Can you prove it? I can prove he's been making cash deposits that don't match his gym's revenue. Whether that's enough to get law enforcement interested depends on how badly you want to push it. I want to push everything. No mercy. Understood. I'll have a complete report by Friday morning. That afternoon, I was teaching Othello to my senior class when the parallels became too obvious to ignore. Why does Iago hate Othello so much? Asked Jennifer Walsh, one of my brightest students. What do you think, Jennifer? Maybe it's not really about Othello. Maybe Iago hates himself and needs someone to blame. Interesting theory. Anyone else? Tommy Chen raised his hand. I think Iago just likes destroying things. Some people get off on rooting other people's lives. Ruining. Close enough. But why does everyone trust him? Sarah Mitchell added. Like Othello completely believes everything Iago says, even when it doesn't make sense. Because, I said, warming to the theme, Iago understands people's weaknesses. He knows exactly what they want to hear and how to make them doubt themselves. Like Frank had done with me. Like Madison had been doing for months. So how do you fight someone like that? Jennifer asked. You stop trusting them. You verify everything. And you remember that people who manipulate others usually have the most to hide. After class, I found a note in my mailbox from Principal Delaney. See me before you leave today. Tom's office felt smaller than usual, cramped with tension and unspoken concerns. Chris, we need to discuss your situation. What situation is that? Don't play games. The whole town knows you're getting divorced and there are rumors about the reasons why. What kind of rumors? The kind that make parents nervous about their children's teachers. Janet Morrison called again this morning. She's concerned about your emotional stability and thinks the school board should review your employment. I sat back in my chair, feeling the familiar weight of other people's judgments. Tom, I haven't done anything wrong. Haven't you? Because from what I hear, you've been stalking your wife, hiring private investigators, and making wild accusations about respected community members. Respected community members? Frank Delacroix has been training half the football team. Parents trust him with their kids. If only they knew what else he'd been selling to their kids. And your wife runs a successful business that employs 6 people. These aren't random targets, Chris. These are people with reputations and connections. People who've been stealing from me and lying to everyone in town. That's for the courts to decide. What I need to know is whether you can continue doing your job while this plays out. I looked at Tom's face and realized he'd already made his decision. The question was whether I'd make it easy for him or force him to fight. I can do my job. Can you? Because yesterday you spent an entire class period discussing the psychology of revenge and betrayal. That's not curriculum, Chris. That's therapy. It's Shakespeare. It's inappropriate, and it needs to stop. He leaned forward. I'm placing you on administrative leave pending the resolution of your personal situation. You'll keep your benefits, but you won't be in the classroom. For how long? Until the school board decides you're no longer a distraction. I wanted to argue, to fight, to demand fairness and due process. But I was tired of fighting battles I couldn't win through conventional means. Fine. Chris. I said fine, Tom. I'll clean out my desk and be gone by tomorrow. That evening, I sat in my empty house and took stock of the situation. I'd lost my job, my marriage, and my best friend. My reputation was in ruins, and half the town thought I was having some kind of breakdown. But I still had my evidence, my attorney, and a court date that would expose everything. My phone rang. Madison's number. Chris, we need to talk. Do we? Please, just meet me for coffee. Neutral ground. One conversation before this gets completely out of hand. Something in her voice made me curious. Desperation, maybe, or fear. When? Now. The Starbucks on Main Street. I'll be waiting. I found Madison in a corner booth, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. She'd been crying, her makeup was smudged, and her hands were shaking as she gripped her coffee cup. Thank you for coming. I sat down across from her, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the way she kept glancing toward the door. You look terrible. I feel terrible. She attempted a smile. This isn't how I wanted things to go. How did you want them to go? Quietly, civilly, like adults who'd grown apart instead of enemies trying to destroy each other. You should have thought of that before you started stealing my money. I know I screwed up, Chris, but this has gone too far. You've lost your job, I'm about to lose my business, and Frank... She trailed off. What about Frank? He's talking about leaving town, says the pressure isn't worth it. Smart man. Is it? Because if he leaves, I lose everything. My business partner, my future, the only person who's made me happy in years. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Madison, you made your choices. Now you get to live with the consequences. Do I? Because I keep thinking there has to be another way. Some kind of compromise that lets us both move forward. What kind of compromise? She leaned forward, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable, hopeful, willing to fight for what she wanted. I'll give you the house, free and clear. I'll pay back every penny I transferred to Frank's business. I'll even give you half of the boutique's value. In exchange for? You drop the adultery charges, file for irreconcilable differences instead of fraud. Let Frank and me start over somewhere else without criminal records or destroyed reputations. It was a generous offer, more than I'd probably get through litigation, and without the time and expense of a court battle. Why should I agree to that? Because you're not a vindictive person, Chris. You're angry and hurt, but you're not cruel. You don't really want to destroy us. You just want justice. She was right. The old Chris would have taken the deal, chalked it up to experience, and moved on with his life. But the old Chris wouldn't have been sitting in this coffee shop in the first place. What about the steroids? Her face went white. What steroids? The ones Frank's been selling to high school kids. Did you know about that, Madison? Were you helping finance a drug operation with our money? That's not... He wouldn't... He would. And he did. My investigator has proof. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're lying. I pulled out my phone and showed her Jim Hawkins' preliminary report. Photos of Frank meeting with teenagers behind the gym, cash transactions that didn't match his books, text messages discussing supplements and special training. Oh my God! So no Madison, no deals, no compromises, no fresh starts. You chose Frank over me, and Frank chose money over everything else. Now you both get to live with that choice. I stood up to leave, but her voice stopped me. Chris, wait, please. If this comes out in court, it won't just destroy Frank. It'll destroy those kids too. Their scholarships, their futures, their families. She was right about that. High school athletes caught using steroids would face suspension, loss of college opportunities, and public humiliation. Then maybe Frank should have thought about that before he started dealing. Maybe he should have, but those kids didn't know what they were getting into. They trusted him. Like I had trusted him. Like Madison had trusted him. What are you asking me to do? Give me 24 hours. Let me talk to Frank, convince him to shut down that part of his business and leave town quietly. Then we can handle the divorce without destroying innocent people. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and saw something I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. Not for betraying me, but for the collateral damage her choices had caused. 24 hours, I said finally. But Madison? If Frank's still in town on Saturday morning, I'm turning everything over to the police. The steroids, the financial fraud, all of it. And if he leaves? Then we stick to the divorce. You pay me back, I get the house, and you disappear from my life forever. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over and those kids still have futures. I left her sitting in that coffee shop, probably trying to figure out how to convince her lover to abandon everything he'd built and run away with her. Good luck with that conversation. 24 hours. Then, we'd see who Madison really chose when the chips were down. Me and the kids Frank had endangered, or the man who'd helped her steal my money and ruin my life. Either way, I'd finally have my answer. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and waiting for the phone to ring. 24 hours had passed since my ultimatum to Madison, and I hadn't heard from her, Frank, or anyone else involved in this mess. At 9 a.m., my phone buzzed. Jim Hawkins. Frank Delacroix cleaned out his gym last night, he reported. Took everything valuable and left town around 3 this morning. His truck was spotted heading west on Interstate 70. What about Madison? Still in town as far as I know, but her boutique's been closed since yesterday afternoon. So Frank had chosen self-preservation over love. Not surprising, but I wondered how Madison was handling the abandonment. Any word on the steroid operation? Shut down. Frank destroyed most of the evidence before he left, but I've got enough documentation to prove it existed. The question is whether you still want to pursue it. I thought about those kids, Tommy Chen, Sarah Mitchell, dozens of others who'd trusted Frank with their futures. They deserved to know what they'd been taking, but they also deserved a chance to recover from their mistakes. Hold off for now. Let me see how today plays out. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. Rebecca Torres had prepared thoroughly, organizing our evidence into a presentation that would systematically destroy Madison's credibility and expose the full scope of her financial manipulation. But first, I had one more stop to make. Madison's boutique sat empty, its windows dark and displaying yesterday's fashions to an audience of passing strangers. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago, back when we trusted each other with everything. Inside, the store felt like a museum of abandoned dreams. Expensive clothes hung on racks like ghosts of better times, and the cash register sat open and empty. I found Madison in the back office, surrounded by boxes and paperwork. She looked up when I entered, and her eyes were red with exhaustion and tears. "He's gone," she said simply. "I know. 20 years of friendship, and he just left. Didn't even say goodbye." I sat down across from her, noting how small she looked surrounded by the wreckage of her business. What did you expect? I expected him to fight, to choose us over running away. She laughed bitterly. I guess I expected him to be more like you. Like me? You never ran. Even when things got bad, even when I was horrible to you, you stayed and fought for what you believed in. It was probably the nicest thing she'd said to me in months. Madison, what are you doing here? The hearing's in 4 hours. I'm closing the store. Liquidating everything. There's no point in fighting anymore. She gestured to the boxes around her. Inventory, records, the physical evidence of dreams that had turned into nightmares. What about your attorney? Your defense strategy? What defense? Frank's gone, the money's missing, and everyone in town thinks I'm a cheating gold digger who destroyed her marriage for a con man. Aren't you? She considered the question seriously. Yeah, I guess I am. We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the expensive debris of her ambitions. Chris, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. If I had come to you 6 months ago and said I was unhappy, that I wanted a divorce, that I needed to start over, would you have helped me? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Probably not. I would have fought for the marriage, tried to fix things, made it as difficult as possible for you to leave. That's what I figured. So I did it the coward's way. I made you the villain so I could justify being selfish. And Frank? Frank was convenient. Someone who wanted me and didn't ask hard questions about where the money came from. She shrugged. Turns out convenience isn't the same as loyalty. No, it's not. Madison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where her business had thrived for 3 years. I'm not going to contest the divorce. Madison, I mean it. Take the house, take your money back, take whatever you need to rebuild your life. I'll sign whatever papers your attorney puts in front of me. What about your future, your fresh start? I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll move somewhere new, start over completely. Maybe I'll finally grow up and stop expecting other people to solve my problems. There was something different about her voice, a maturity I hadn't heard before, like losing everything had finally forced her to see clearly. The hearing's still happening. Rebecca's prepared to present evidence. Let her. The town deserves to know the truth, and those investors deserve to get their money back from Frank's scams. Madison turned back to face me. But Chris, can you do me one favor? What? Don't mention the steroids. Those kids made mistakes, but they don't deserve to have their lives ruined because they trusted the wrong person. It was the same request she'd made yesterday, but now it carried different weight. She wasn't asking to protect Frank. She was asking to protect innocent people who'd been caught in the crossfire. Already decided. Frank's gone, the operation's shut down, and the kids learned a lesson without losing their futures. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank them for having their whole lives ahead of them. I stood to leave, but Madison's voice stopped me. Chris, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the affair or the money, but for making you feel like you weren't enough. You were always enough. I was just too selfish to appreciate it. I know. And I did know. Finally. The courthouse was busier than I'd expected, filled with the usual mix of lawyers, defendants, and family members navigating the legal system's complexities. Rebecca Torres met me in the lobby, carrying a briefcase full of evidence and wearing the confident expression of someone who'd already won. How are you feeling? Ready? Good, because this is going to be thorough. By the time we're done, everyone in that courtroom will understand exactly what your wife and her boyfriend did to you. Actually, Rebecca, I want to make some changes. Her smile faltered. What kind of changes? Madison's not contesting the divorce. She's agreed to return all the money, sign over the house, and accept full responsibility for the affair. Chris, that's great news, but we should still present our evidence. Make sure the judge understands the full scope of... No, just the basics. Adultery, financial impropriety, irreconcilable differences. Nothing about Frank's other business activities. Rebecca stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Chris, we have enough evidence to destroy both of them. Why would you want to hold back? Because destroying people isn't justice. It's just destruction. It's also leverage. What if Madison changes her mind? What if she decides to fight after all? She won't. How can you be sure? Because she finally realized what I realized, that this isn't about winning or losing. It's about ending something that should have ended a long time ago. The hearing itself was anticlimactic. Madison appeared with a court-appointed attorney, signed the papers Rebecca had prepared, and agreed to every term without argument. The judge seemed surprised by the lack of drama, but accepted the settlement and granted the divorce decree. 30 minutes. 15 years of marriage dissolved in 30 minutes of legal paperwork and formal declarations. Outside the courthouse, Madison approached me one last time. So this is it? This is it. What will you do now? Rebuild. Find a new job, fix up the house, maybe take that European vacation I've been talking about for 10 years. That sounds nice. What about you? I'm thinking about moving to Colorado. My cousin has a ski resort there. She's offered me a job managing the gift shop. Madison smiled. It's not much, but it's honest work. Honest work is underrated. Yeah, I'm learning that. She extended her hand, and I shook it. Two strangers who'd once been married, saying goodbye without anger or recrimination. Take care of yourself, Chris. You too, Madison. I watched her walk away, probably toward a future that would be smaller than she'd planned, but more authentic than the one she'd been building with Frank's help. 6 months later, I was teaching again, at a private school in the next county, where my reputation as a thorough researcher was considered an asset rather than a liability. The pay was better, the students were motivated, and the administration appreciated teachers who understood the difference between education and indoctrination. I'd kept the house, renovated the kitchen, and finally fixed that garage door. The place felt like home again, filled with books and quiet evenings and the kind of peace that comes from knowing exactly who you are. Frank never returned to town. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd settled in Nevada, working construction and keeping a low profile. Madison had indeed moved to Colorado, where she was apparently thriving in her new role as a gift shop manager and part-time ski instructor. The kids Frank had been supplying with steroids finished their senior year without incident. Most of them earned college scholarships based on legitimate achievements, and none of them ever knew how close they'd come to losing everything. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about the man I'd been before this all started, naive, trusting, content with mediocrity. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder but wiser, someone who understood that the world wasn't always fair, but could still choose to be decent. I'd learned to fight dirty when necessary, but I'd also learned when to stop fighting, and in the end, that made all the difference.